Okay, so I shot a quick short on condensation, but I'm going to shoot a little bit longer format video just to address it in more detail now. Um, and I know I'll get a ton of comments about shipping containers, a pop can, it's going to condensate, rust inside and all that. So I'm going to try to cover all the bases I know of as far as condensation and just put this to rest. And I will try to resist the temptation to go in the comments and explain why they don't condensate. So I'm just going to put it in the video. That's my opinion and leave it where it's at. So this is a dark gray metal building. If this building was not insulated and we have a cool winter morning, sunny, so the dew point is, let's say, 30 and the temperature is 28, so you have a dew point that's close to the temperature, which is exactly when you're going to get condensation. Will the inside of this building condensate? No. So with batt insulation, it allows the obviously interior of the building to stay cool or warm and not heat up or cool rapidly, which would cause your condensation. But if this building was not insulated, would it condensate on the inside walls? No. So a shipping container is no different. Every single product, well, virtually every single product, but high-end cars, furniture, everything comes over in shipping containers. They come across the ocean. So many of those mornings are cold and those containers are dark colored containers. They do have vents on the containers, but those containers do not condensate. Millions of engineers and billions of dollars involved in the process of creating a container, putting vents on it. They know what the temperatures are going to be. They know that if a container condensates with a couple of Mercedes in them, they're going to get ruined, or $100,000 worth of furniture, they're going to get ruined. So they do not condensate. So I don't know where this idea comes from. So as far as shipping containers, when can you get condensation? So after having all these containers on my lot over the years, have I ever seen condensation? Yes. So the only time I ever see condensation is on the exact morning that I described, when you have a temperature that's cold and your dew point is very close to your temperature. So your dew point, once it meets your temperature, is when you're going to get moisture. So if you have a dark colored used container, let's say a red one, I've never seen condensation inside of a light container, and you left the doors open, and the sun comes up and hits that container, and that container warms up rapidly, and the doors are open, so there's a rapid exchange of air flow into the container, is when I've seen condensation from the roof of the container. But if you have the doors closed on the container, I've never seen condensation. And so for me, that has to do with the rapid exchange of air coming through the doors. So basically the container is allowing, via the doors being open, that cool air to come in rapidly, and the outside of the container warms rapidly. So what's different about an office or a building or a house? Well, for our offices that we build, they are sealed. So you don't have that rapid exchange of air. And this container, and this I think is where a lot of people get stuck on the idea that this container is going to condensate versus this metal building. The size of this container and the size of this building do not matter in relation to the possibility for condensation. So this is a darker colored container. Let's say it's a lighter colored container. I don't think I've ever seen anyone make an argument based on the color of the container. They just say shipping containers are like, pop cans. That's what I keep hearing, and they're going to condensate. Well, if that's the case, then every metal building built is going to condensate. So all the architects, all the engineers, they're all wrong. You cannot build metal buildings, they're going to condensate. And so if you insulate them and they're going to condensate, then you're going to ruin your insulation. Like this building has batt insulation, so if this building condensates, you're going to get moisture behind the insulation, which just doesn't happen. And then I hear a discussion about an air gap behind the insulation, so that if it does condensate, you've got airflow behind that insulation, between the insulation and the metal surface of the container, to allow that condensation to dry without getting the insulation wet, which I guess in some cases might be appropriate. So if you have a 40-foot red colored container and you don't have a proper HVAC system like a mini split that is dehumidifying the air, and you're running a propane heater or wood stove in there, and so you've got an 80-degree or 70-degree container and it's 10 degrees outside, and you're not dehumidifying the air and you have a rapid exchange of air, I think you could get condensation behind that insulation. So there's that. But in this application, how we build our containers, we have HVAC. We have dehumidifying. There's no rapid exchange of air. And the spray foam, if you look at all the data on spray foam, all the engineering data, once you hit 2 inches of closed cell spray foam and it's against the wall of the container cannot change temperatures rapidly enough to create condensation on the surface metal of the container, especially on the interior side. And the spray foam is literally attached to that metal. So if you had a pop can and you had an insulator on it, it would not condensate. So, but the containers, for all intents and purposes, are no different than any metal building ever built. And the millions of metal buildings that have spray foam insulation, all of those architects and engineers are not wrong to spray foam those metal buildings, and many of those metal buildings do not have HVAC. So in our case, with the 2.5 to 3 inches of spray foam that we apply, it's an R16, R18 insulation factor. If you're running the mini split, there's absolutely no concern. But even if you're not running the mini split, that insulation is, the container is not going to condensate under any circumstance. So I just want to put this idea and discussion to bed. A container is no different than a metal building, and there's not a single person in the world who has stopped building metal buildings because they condensate. We've been building them for 100 years. It's just not a concern. And then a side note, as far as what we do with the containers, a lot of these are offices or like hunting cabins. You're not going to build a shed that's portable that you can transport across the country via conventional transportation methods that's rigid, that you can transport that cheaply. You can't do that with a shed, mobile home, anything like that. So the containers are absolutely ideal for the situations that we build them for. Now, do I think building a home out of containers is really cool? Yes. Are you going to save money building a home out of shipping containers versus conventional stick building? Probably not by the time you get engineering involved, because they're not that familiar with them. But you're never going to beat a container for like a job site box versus a shed or stick building or whatever you could build out of, because you can plop this down on the job site and you can buy it or rent it, but it's going to last forever. And the exterior of the container is absolutely indestructible. It's very secure. Now, of course, someone could break out the window and dive through the window or whatever. That's fine. There's lower hanging fruit around, but you don't have any maintenance on the outside of this container for virtually the life of it. In 10 years, what are you going to have to do to the exterior of this container? I don't think, even in 20 years, you might have a little bit of touch-up paint, but in 20 years, a shed is rotten. If you haven't replaced the siding, the sealant, the paint, hail, you name it, the shed has to be maintained so much. So containers really shine when you leave them at the dimensions that they came in, so 20 or 40 foot, and you build an office or a little cabin out of them that doesn't require advanced engineering and a lot of architects to get involved. They absolutely shine in those applications. So when I shoot these containers, I get a lot of comments like, man, you can build out of containers, you can stick build for, that's not really what we're doing. So I think building houses out of them is cool, but mostly what we're doing is keeping the 20 or 40 foot containers and using that structure to build something really cool inside that lasts forever, never goes down in value, and just as far as depreciation and maintenance, beats stick building by a long shot, because the shell of these containers, I mean, you can't build, this is $3,500 for a new container. We can't build this container in the US for $20,000, let alone a shed. Maybe you can build a shed for $4,000 or $5,000, but it won't last 1/4 the life of a container. But as far as condensation, it is not a concern. It's never been a concern. So I don't know where this idea comes from that these are going to condensate and rust. So that's all I have to say about that. So I'm not going to discuss condensation anymore.